Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with episode number 23 of Rabbi Chaim Coffman's Controversial Issues, coming to you from the Holy Land, Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Rabbi, welcome back to the show. Pleasure to see you again. I know you want
Always good to be here.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone.
Right on, right on. Thank you for tolerating our later start than normal. I woke up out of a dead coma. Technically speaking, my wife said I was sawing logs so much it was disturbing the goats outside. So I'm not really sure what that means. I've never experienced that before, but
you can't put that on me. I didn't put you in a coma. So
yeah, there you go.
Don't blame me.
There you go. That's funny. Well, good deal. So welcome back to the show, everyone. Phone lines are open as we speak. Tonight's topic, we may bounce around a little bit, but one of the main things we're going to cover tonight is going to be discussing basically the Mesoretic text. It's been coming up a little bit more and more frequently, mainly because of a post that I had put up a couple days ago on Facebook. And but the post that I had actually put up, and we won't actually go very far into one side of it, had to do with the reliability of the New Testament text, and how many there's like thousands of variances in the New Testament text. And I had commented on my post that that the Tanakh is really the only reliable. If you're going to look to the Bible for any source of information about God, the Tanakh is the only reliable text you can find. Mainly in my mind, of course, I was really pointing towards the Torah, but of course the Tanakh as well. So I even have some questions that I've never even asked about it that's coming to mind as we speak. But anyway, the phone line is 855-952-4253. Phone number is on your screen. And I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to call in. And so starting it off...
Wait a minute, you have a lot of questions? Well, sorry, gotta go. It's been a great show.
Oh, this was only a 30-minute show?
I can't hear you. Must be bad connection.
That sounds like the bad joke at the McDonald's microphone drive-thru. I'd like a large... Oh boy, this ought to be interesting. So anyway, let me make sure that we are live and streaming. I believe we are. Yep, everything looks good. Just for a heads up for people who are unaware, the website, tanakhtalk.com, when you go there to actually view a live video, a lot of times it works fine. Sometimes it doesn't actually play the updated things. There's something with YouTube where part of their formats doesn't link up whatever perfectly. I don't even know the technical terminology for it, but most of the time, I think when you go to tanakhtalk.com, you'll actually, at the right time, like if we start at 8, you go there 8 o'clock, or you go there a few minutes before 8, you'll see the main video you'll see on screen will be the last one that I did. It won't be the current one until we actually go live. And we probably won't start on time all the time anyway because it's a live show. So I will be posting, I'm pretty sure I'll be doing Facebook Live like all the time as well. But you can also, as a fallback plan, always go directly to YouTube and just leave that channel up. And once I start going live, your screen should auto refresh. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on into this thing. So my whole idea is the Mesoretic text. Mesoretic means it's handed down, right? And so, in fact, let me just do this. Rather than me trying to paraphrase, let me just read what I wrote. And it'll give you more context as to why I'm actually pushing this out there. Let me go to my page.
If you can read this, you don't need glasses, right?
No, if you can read this, you're too dang close.
If you read this, you get a virus.
That's okay. So here, of course, everything I post on Facebook is bait for conversation. It really is, because I want people to think. I want them to consider things they may not have considered before. So basically, I said the only thing Jesus and the New Testament accomplished was creating a divided house by his or its not so clear messages. There are more sects and translations of the that just reminded me of what the other part of the topic was, of the Christian New Testament based on mistranslations and misunderstandings than one could possibly imagine. Trust the Tanakh. It's the only part of the Bible that's trustworthy. Okay, so the other part that I'm bringing into this thing is there are more sects in Christianity and that was one part of my post. Idealistically, now that wasn't even the main part what I was trying to push, but it was nonetheless commented on. So, and people were commenting and saying, well, there's a lot of sects in Judaism too, like lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of sects. And so my response to that was, there's really, and I may be totally wrong on it, I just, based on what I've seen so far, there's really only 6 or 7 main sects, from Reform to, you got Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. Of course, there's probably Reformodox in there somewhere, and then ultra-Orthodox,
anything in between.
Yeah, and so, but what are the? And the comment back on that was, well, you only have a handful of sects in Christianity too. You got Baptist, Presbyterian, blah blah blah. So, when did titles start coming into play for Judaism? Because I heard it was like around 250 years ago. It hasn't always been that way.
Right.
And so, how serious are these divisions in the Torah world? Are they? I mean,
well, I don't think you have that much time to cover this topic.
Okay, well, that's good. That means you have a lot of.
We'll be here till tomorrow to get through your rainstorm. So I don't.
Well, that's good. That means you have a lot of information. This is the good topic then for it. But first, I want to start with the Mesoretic text anyway, because to me, honestly, is what's important is the text reliability. I don't really care how many denominations of Christianity there are. I just know that in Christianity, the New Testament, there isn't any trusted text. Even the text that they seem trusted, everything contradicts itself.
Right, but that's exactly the point. Even if there aren't so many sects, there are a lot of different texts out there. Right. So even if there are 10 sects or 15 sects or whatever they are, you still have a tremendous amount of differentiation between each one. So that I don't really think the number. The number is really gonna matter, even though there are different groups holding by different things. Some aspects, some more, some less, or whatever.
Right. And so the text itself, for example, in the Torah scroll, in the first 5 books, are how many variations of text are there? I've always seen that there are none. In fact, if you find where there is a single letter variation, even in the way that the letter is used, whether it's a enlarged letter or reduced letter, that Torah scroll is not kosher and cannot be used. So it's like,
right. That is definitely true. There is if you look at a Chumash with the 5 books, you'll see sometimes it says it'll say like there's a vav that's missing. This is the way it's read. This is the way it was written, and this is the way it was read. Right. The difference between the ksiv, what they say is written, and the kriya, the way which it was read. Now, if you look at the difference between the word as it's read and as it's written down, it's really not that it's not that big of a difference. And the difference that'll make a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, that it'll make it invalid is if you have a letter there, let's say you can't tell what it is, or maybe it looks like a different letter. If it changes the meaning of the text, then that's going to be a major issue.
Right. Gotcha.
If it doesn't change the meaning of the text, which in most of these cases, the way it's written and the way it is said will not necessarily change. Right. Change it. If it's written one way, or another way, it's not necessarily going to be, such a big deal that we're going to disqualify a Torah. There are some discrepancies that have come up, over the years. But the funny thing is, I shouldn't say funny. It's ironic, is that it's not like you take 20 Torah scrolls and you have 20 different ways of doing it. In other words, you have some letters missing, some there, some not. Whatever the case is, it is pretty uniform. Right, so even if people want to say, "Oh, look, there are different texts and all these different things," they're really not. Because not only that, but it doesn't change the meaning.
But in the Torah scroll itself,
that's a major difference.
But in the Torah scroll itself, there are no variances of letters, right? If there's 13,563 letters, then you'll find exactly that same amount of letters in every Torah scroll on the planet, the kosher ones.
Right, but if you look in a Chumash, you will see differences.
Right, gotcha.
The way that it's written and the way that it's read. But again, even with those differences, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever in the meaning. If it would be something that would change the meaning, okay, then you got a major, problem.
Have you heard, or is it true that the Paleo Hebrew, the most ancient of Hebrew, is that the first Torah scroll or something that was ever written was actually written in Paleo Hebrew? Is that a true claim that you know of?
I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Okay. But any Torah scroll that they've ever found, has been written in the same
Mesoretic text, right? Got it.
Right. Yeah. In the same text. Now there is something interesting that I'll throw out there because it's this is controversial issues, and B, it's out in everywhere else except in the Orthodox world, meaning in academia. Remember, when they found Torah scrolls, usually, or they found like a Chumash, they found different. They weren't all attached. Remember, when they didn't have paper way back when, or it was very very limited. So they had they'll have for Genesis, they'll have for Exodus, they'll have for Leviticus, right, etc. They weren't necessarily all attached into one book. That being said, so in academia, I can tell you when we speak about the conservative movement and other movements, when I was at when I learned by the conservative movement, one of the things they pushed when I took this course in biblical criticism, which they claim either makes you orthodox or an atheist, not necessarily in that order.
Right.
So what they say is that there's what we call the documentary hypothesis. Now, this is a pretty well-known fact all over academia. Right. Obviously, we don't. Orthodox Jews don't hold of it, and I'll explain why in a second. So what they hold is there were really 4 authors and a redactor. Right. There was a J document, which they claim, which is God's name Yud-K Vav-K. Right, where God with the name Hashem is put in the Torah. They claim there's an E document, which is for Elohim, right, the God of judgment. There's a P document, which is a priestly document, like the book of Leviticus talks about all the sacrifices, and there's a D, right, document, which is called for Deuteronomy, which they claim, and others may claim the same thing, and that is, it looks like a totally different book than all the other books, right? And then there was a JEPD, and then there was a redactor. So he put everything together. So I remember, at the beginning of this course, the professor gets up and he says, that the Torah is very holy, etc., going on to all these different things, and then step by step he was comparing it to Shakespeare, comparing it to Hammurabi's Code, comparing it to who knows what other type of literature around the same time to show how similar it is. Going through the biblical epic Gilgamesh, right, the Babylonian story of the flood, and the comparisons with that, and at the end. They would, at the end of the semester, the Torah's holy, whatever, and they just turn the Torah into a pretzel, right? So I remember going through this course and saying, well, I happen to believe that God passed the Torah down, to Moshe, and Moshe passed it down to Jewish people. Why? So I can't answer that, right? Maybe, maybe my soul will be able to answer that, at another time, but I can't answer why exactly that was. At the same time. At the same time, I had all this information I didn't know what to deal with, right? There was a tremendous amount of information that, this documentary hypothesis, everybody in academia holds of it. I mean, it's across the board. It's not like, there's just a minority who think it's a good thing. This is, this is a well-documented, thing, especially in academia. So why don't we hold of it? Why doesn't Orthodox hold of it? First of all, if you go out through history, right? If you go through history, they never found these documents by themselves. In other words, when they found the Torah scroll, it was all together.
Okay.
Right? You had all 5 books together. They never found a J document,
right.
the J document, an E doc. They never found all these documents.
I see.
Separate.
Right.
Right. And so therefore, that is a very strong deterrent to say that cannot be accurate at all, because if you don't find it intact way back when, and they can trace that, then I don't really care what your philosophy is. They never found. It's kind of like for evolution, looking for the missing link. I remember like 15 years ago, the closest thing they found now to the missing link in evolution, was a jawbone and a set of teeth.
Right.
So I don't know if that counts as like, okay, so, I'm square, right? Believing that the Bible is true and God passed it down. But no, you have to hold an evolution, and you have to believe that this jawbone and set of teeth are the missing link.
Right. Gotcha.
That's a little bit of a stretch for me. But, we also believe in the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus. But, that's a different topic. Maybe we'll have a controversial issues about that. We're not going to get into that now.
Right.
But they never found those different documents. If you go through history and you look at the Torah scrolls that they found, right? The Torah scrolls that they found are all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, what an interesting, coincidence. Again, when you have a big game of telephone, and the Torah is passed down, you will have discrepancies in how words are spelled. Sometimes there'll be a word spelled with an ayin, that doesn't make a sound. There's sometimes, it's done with an aleph. It doesn't necessarily change, the meaning, right? But there could be the way things were spelled. Sometimes those things could have been lost. So there are some discrepancies. But at the end of the day, even if you say there are a few discrepancies, it doesn't change anything, right? The meaning, the meaning doesn't change. So some people, jump on the bandwagon and say, look, there are differences. It's not the same. Do me a favor. If there are, 50,000 letters, in words, throughout the 5 books, and 99.8%, of all the Torah scrolls, are all the same. You have a discrepancy here and there,
mm-hmm.
Maybe between 10 words or a little bit more. That's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So secular Jews say, see, I got that 0.02%.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like
0.02%.
It's like,
right? I think I told this story before. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's kind of like whenever in the Christian world they tend to attach themselves to the replacement theology because they see how the Jews rejected God, and like 0.01%. or however that mathematically equates out, that had rebelled against God and followed through the golden calf, the whole golden calf
mm-hmm.
idea. But if you actually do the math out, and there was like probably 3 million people there, and only 3,000
right.
suffered a death penalty for their guilt in it,
right.
that looks like a 99.99%, passing score.
That was the mixed multitude also.
Right. Yeah. Right. Wasn't even the right. That's pretty wild. Okay, so let's take this caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, it's David from London.
Hi, David. Welcome back.
Hi. Yes, so few things. One of them is the Septuagint. It's some people say that it's not just a translation. It's that the actual, that if one looks at the Greek, then one can see that the actual words themselves were slightly different in places. I think there was one part where it talks about the Elohim in terms of the gods. Not like there were many gods, but it's just talking about the sons of the Elohim in one place, where the Masoretic says something slightly different.
Which is the Kriya and Iksiv, right? Is that what you were talking about, the Kriya and the Iksiv with Rabbi Coffman was saying?
No. So actually,
saying that
like
okay.
the meaning of a verse.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact example of it.
Right.
Another one was the Dead Sea Scrolls. Slight differences in words there. Like not in the 5 books,
right?
But in some of the others.
Gotcha.
And the other point is the oldest Torah scroll is not that old. It's maybe sort of 900 CE or something like that.
Right.
Those are the 3 points, really.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, David.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye. One thing I was going to say was, as I questioned about the Paleo-Hebrew versus the Mesoretic text, one thing that I have found was that they may have, the letters looked different, but they were the same amount of letters, and they were just
right.
shaped different than the original, but they were all exactly the same letters with the exact same meanings and everything.
Right.
They just changed the way they looked.
Right. Keep in mind about the, about the Septuagint. The Septuagint, actually was really a tragedy that they made them. They put 70, more than 70 scholars in different places and told them write a translation of the Torah.
Right.
Right. This was a terrible tragedy, that occurred. But
Explain.
the one main consistent factor in all this is that they all came out the same. Now, as David mentioned, there are some differences, right? Now you have to keep in mind, why there are a few differences. So, there are, when you look at some of the things, it probably wasn't, so politically correct, to write certain things down because, certain people, may have got offended. There was a king whose wife's name was Arnevet. Well, Arnevet is a rabbit.
Interesting.
So, you don't necessarily want to put that in because your head looks better on the other side of the plate than, like, oh, you calling my wife? You calling my wife a rabbit? Like, no, actually, that was a compliment. I could have called her a lot worse things, but we're going to keep this show clean. So,
You're right.
But, there were certain things also when it came to anthropomorphisms, of, putting man's, the language speaking in the language of man, even though, you think God has an outstretched hand, he's got this big hand, he's gonna totally smack you upside the head. So, when the Torah says, when God, when he came down, right, he came down to see what was going on, let's say by Sodom or other things, or let us make man, in our image. There were different things that were, the language a little bit, was changed, for different meaning, for different reasons. The meaning itself didn't change. Right. That's a major difference. Even in that case, where things were changed, that doesn't say that the text isn't authoritative. If you take it further, the Septuagint also, if you look at it, has a tremendous amount of, Christian theology in there also. What the Christians did with it afterwards is a different thing. That's a whole, that's a whole different thing, and how it, why we reject it is because of a lot of these, Christian nuances, that were put into it. The same thing, I get this question a lot about the Apocrypha, and about different books that didn't make it into the canon, right? We have 24 books, of the Bible, including the first 5, all throughout Tanakh. So, there are all these other books. They say the Book of Enoch and, the Book of the Maccabees and, different things. Why don't we hold by it? Well, we don't hold by it because first of all, it was after the time of, it was canonized, but there's a tremendous amount of, Christian ideology that, that are in these, or other influences that are in these different books, and that's why 100% that we reject it and it's not, authentic. Which you could ask the question, okay, so how do we know the 24 books are authentic? How do we know all these things are not, different? And it's a whole question we spoke about. We spoke about by oral tradition, with a big game of telephone, and all that. Again, the discrepancies, no matter how you slice it, the discrepancies are minimal. Mm-hmm. For 2,000 years, I mean, this is not a leap of faith. I believe. No, it's not a leap of faith because, the discrepancies are minimal. Over 2,000 years, there should have been a tremendous amount more. And the fact that if you go anywhere in the world on the 15th of Nisan, and everyone's eating, 3 matzahs and you have 4 cups of wine and a cup of Elijah, it's all the same. The only difference is, the last 250 years, which we'll get to, these so-called other sects of Judaism, they're the ones that change what was really going on. Right. In other words, up until 250 years ago, everybody was Orthodox, so everybody did the same thing. It's not, you had some splinter groups, right? You had the Samaritans, you had other, you had other groups, as well, one of the prayers actually we say every day is to wipe these people out. That they shouldn't have any influence, because there were these sectarian groups that were causing tremendous havoc amongst the Jewish people. But guess what happened? They died. There's nothing left of them. Right. So yeah, there were a number of them. It wasn't, you're not talking more than 10, or the very small amount. And what happened to them? You go against the rabbis. That's what happens. You get wiped off the face of the map. Spiritually, and that's exactly what happened to these so-called, these so-called other groups. So, so again, at the end of the day, what you have is continuity, right? You have a tremendous amount of continuity that hasn't changed. So if you look at the Christian Bible and all the different texts, and this has changed and that's changed, yeah, that's a major red flag. If it's continuous, and it's stood the test of time, then, that's it. That in and of itself shows that that it works and that it's the real thing. If you have 20 different texts and 50 different interpretations, and no one's holding the same way on just about anything, then who cares? You might think, wow, there are a few differentiations. Right. Maybe I'm over exaggerating. Now that could be. I've been accused of worse. So that may be the case. But if you're going to claim that the text itself is authentic, 99.8%, is a lot better than 48% or 32% or anything else. I'll take those statistics anytime. Even though, so I was going to tell you this story that I was working with a college student once, and he said, Rabbi, you can show me 99% all this is true, but I still have that 1% free will. So I said, you're in college, right? So he says, yeah. I said, well, I went to college, I studied history, so all I had to do was write papers the whole time. So I said, how do you write a term paper? He said, you pick a thesis, you take the body of work, you prove it, and then you write your conclusion. I said, right. I said, what happens, you're writing your conclusion, you brought all these proofs, and you say, well, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's like this, maybe it's like that, maybe, I don't know, we're not, I'm not really sure. I said, what would happen if you do that in your conclusion? He goes, oh, that's easy, you'll fail. I said, oh, why will you fail? He said, because you didn't prove what you set out to do. You left it out, as a doubt. So I said, okay. I said, but if you bring all the proof, right, you can't say I still have that 1% doubt. At what point do you say, well, I'm just going to let my free will kick in? So we call that, in the vernacular, we call that the evil inclination. Because you can convince yourself of anything. If something's almost 100%, like a DNA test, right, it's just about 100%. You can say, nah, I got that 1%, I'm not sure. But they're going to use that as evidence, right? Because it's just about 100%. Again, only a Jew would do this. No, but I get the 1%. Okay, yeah, I got the 1% of DNA that you're an idiot. So like, what in the world are you going to claim, in that 1%? So if all these things are uniform, if you were to tell me, Judaism throughout the millennia, everyone's been doing different things. Some people ate one matzah on Passover. Some people drank 10 cups of wine. Imagine what happened if I drank 10 cups of wine. You guys all be dead, right? So you drank 10 cups of wine. There was no cup for Elijah the prophet, and, it wasn't horseradish. It was really, something sweet smelling, it wasn't bitter herbs, and, people drank, cups of honey or whatever. Then I can understand you have a legitimate question. But if everything for the most part is all continuous and it's all the same, a few discrepancies here and there, it's like you're grasping at straws, looking for, that can't be true. Look, there are different letters. Look, they ate the same hallucinogenic mushroom in the desert. Look, I wear a stupid Tanakh talk hat. Look at all these different things. Who cares? It doesn't prove, no offense to those Tanakh talk hats or buttons. Anyway, which I still haven't gotten, by the way. Anyway, the whole point is
you'll be the first.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
they
don't
still
exist
waiting for
yet.
it to come in the mail. Yeah,
That's
right.
Funny.
Anyway, but if it's proven, like, more than 90% or even higher, how in the world can you make a claim? That is really I think the the ironic part. And it's like, no, but we don't really understand what Ezekiel said. And he had this vision, and he's, and he saw the Beis Hamikdash, and he saw what the temple looked like. Yeah, but we're not really sure. No one's spoken to me lately, so I'm going to throw that out.
Well, let's sit real quickly. Michael Smith on Facebook, watching Facebook Live, he said the Masoretes added the vowel points which did not exist in the original, and so they weren't actually written in they existed. They just weren't written down. They were like the Mesoretic text. It was handed down orally. So it's not that they didn't exist. They just were never written down. It's kind of like the oral law. They said the oral law should have never been written down, but it was. That mean it didn't exist before it was written. It was always there. So, and then there was one more thing.
Right, but there are major differences. We spoke about that. Differences in words. How you put the vowels in is going to make a major difference. Which when some Christians will say, the Talmud this, the Talmud that, but you're relying on this text that the rabbi said these are the vowels that you put into the word.
I think the point that Michael's trying to make on his end possibly is that if the vowels were added, then surely they changed things when they added it, and maybe that's why they put them in there, so you would only read it a certain way to influence the changes. But that's not the case. It was just handed down and said, "Oh, we better write this down."
But again, if you're looking, let's say you're looking at this verse, it says, "Kol chet lamed beis lo tochelu," right? All this, whatever chet lamed beis is, don't eat, right? We don't have any vowels, right? It could mean chalav, it could mean milk, don't eat, or it could mean chelev, forbidden fats. So the rabbis are saying, well, it can't mean milk. That wouldn't make any sense over here, right? So it has to mean something else, like don't cook a calf in its mother's milk. You can tell me it means don't cook a calf in forbidden fats. Well, that would destroy half the yeshivas. Half of the yeshivas the way they serve food, because all cooked in oil and fat and everything else. So like that, that wouldn't make any sense. So it's not like, you could say, well, they put the vowels in to go according to the way they were going to interpret it. Okay, that could be. You have a better way?
Right.
You have any other better situation? If the Torah says don't cook a calf in its mother's milk 3 times, it cannot mean fat. That statement does not make any sense. Right. And when you look at what the rabbis were and who they consisted of, I think I'm going to take their word over here, even if it's going to be their influence on what they think, on what they think this means, because in the other cases it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So you find me a better text that makes more sense, that's going to explain it. Why in the world does it say don't cook a calf in its mother's milk 3 times? Torah doesn't mince any words, doesn't spend a lot of time going through different things. If it says something more than once, obviously there's a reason. Oh, the rabbis are putting their interpretation. Thank you very much. Yes, they are. But how else do you explain it? Come to me with a better explanation. Don't tell me, the prophet Ezekiel or Isaiah, when they were talking about these short little fat, cherubs, with the wings or whatever, and like, we're worshiping them because that's my third interpretation from Webster. Do me a favor, learn the text, learn the Hebrew, and then get back to me, and then tell me what it means. Don't bring me some 8th definition where you think, oh, this is what it means, and it has to be like this. You really think we're worshiping cherubs? These short little fat kids. You really think that's what we're doing? That's called idolatry. We cannot be idolatrous. Non-Jews cannot be idolatrous. Come up with a better explanation. But no, you want to turn the text, you want to twist it, you want to do this. Well, the rabbis did the same thing. You got a better example? This is what we've been doing for the last 3,000 years, and if it wasn't for the rabbis, we wouldn't know what to do at all. So people make all kinds of claims. But again, so go through 50 different texts, go and try and explain it in different ways. This is why Christians keep coming back and they say, oh, the rabbis did this, the rabbis did that. When they look at the text, they say, well, this is what I think it means. Yeah? This is what it means? Are you sure? Does this make sense? Does that make sense? Well, it's a Medrash. Well, it's a Zohar. Well, it's this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, but what you say doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, I would have had to been, drunk, plastered, high to come up with some of these explanations because it fits their worldview. But even if they want to do that, at the end of the day, all these groups are disappearing, so it doesn't really matter anyway.
Right.
You can have 50, you can have 100, it doesn't matter. So when the rabbis put their spin on things, a lot of what they said was based on divine inspiration. You have to understand, I think we mentioned last week, by prayer itself. By prayer itself, a lot of the prayers we say were based on Ezra and the men of the Great Assembly, of the 120 rabbis of the Great Assembly. They had the ability to bring people back from the dead, even though the generation wasn't worthy of it. So you want to tell me, if they had that ability, and these are the type of people we're talking about, so for me, okay, that's a leap of faith. For me, I will take stock in that, because I don't know anybody who can bring people back from the dead today, or in previous generations, until you go way back.
Right.
So, this is the caliber of people we're talking about. They're not just like, you look at Psalms, what King David wrote. All that also was tremendously divinely inspired. You're going to say, oh, he just thought about writing it down, playing his harp, start watching Hee Haw now, start with the banjo and grow my beard a little bit longer. All these fun things. You think what he wrote wasn't prophetic? I mean, go back and look what he said. Forget any of the commentators. Look what he said. You have to understand, who these people are. I'm not saying they're perfect. People have flaws, but you're talking about the greatest people in the history of man created. A lot of these people. So what are you gonna say? I'm not gonna pray because they made up the prayers. Well, I think they're on a pretty high level to be able to do that, and we see that. That it's universal after the temple was destroyed, all across the board. There are differences. This is another case. There are differences a little bit between, what Sephardic people say, what Hasidim say, what Ashkenazim say in a prayer book, but 98% is all the same. It's just a question, it's a question of different things, but 98% is the same. If 98% is the same, I don't think we have too much to argue about.
Right.
I mean, I can find things to argue about. You want to start a fight? Come on, I can find things, but we're not going to go there.
All right, let's take this caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell me your name and where you're calling from.
Yeah, hi, it's David again.
Hey, David.
Hi. From London.
Might as well just pull up a chair.
So I know some people that they try to adjust their pronunciation of Hebrew to make it more like they think it would have been in the past. But also I've heard that the correct way to pronounce the beginning of the Shema is to elongate the Daled of the Echad, and I've heard that according to Jewish law somewhere you're supposed to elongate it. Now there's no I've heard that the correct way to pronounce Daled with no dot in it, because of course it's the Beged Kafat letter.
Right.
So the Daled with no dot in it is a Z, so it would be something like a Hav.
Right.
And I'm curious what you think about that one.
I've heard the difference in Sephardic
versus
Ashkenazic pronunciations too. I wonder if that's why they lean one way or the other, possibly.
It's more because there's more than just Sephardim, because there's also Yemenite pronunciation. The Sephardim don't actually distinguish between Dalet with a dot and Dalet without a dot. They just do a duh. But the Yemenites preserve the distinction with the Dalet still.
Nice.
Got it.
So yeah.
Okay.
The other question I had was with the I don't know what the basis of it, but according to some people, like this some secular guy in Israel called Emmanuel Tov, he says that among the Dead Sea Scrolls, according to his theory, they found a sort of what he considered to be a proto-Septuagint text and a proto-Masoretic, like the Hebrew of them. So he thinks that there are different, very, very different Hebrew texts thousands of years ago in the Judean desert, and the Masoretic one is sort of won out. I've heard an orthodox response, which would be that maybe the Masoretic one is in fact the original. You can't sort of prove that it isn't.
Right.
It's interesting idea. Anyhow.
I think
those are the questions about the Ehaz and the pronunciation, and the both of them. Yeah.
Cool. And I think the Dead Sea Scrolls were, thank you, David. The Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the latest finds, or earliest finds, I guess you could say, would the samples that I've seen people with images of them, it is the Mesoretic text. So I don't know how variant it could be. But again, even if it was, let's say, for example, if it was the Paleo Hebrew was the actual original text, doesn't mean that the meanings or the spellings were changed. Just the shapes of the letters were different back then. So, but I don't know anything more than that, other than just that alone. So, so what about what about what you saying?
So when you look at the
Beget Capit
Shema,
letters,
there are different pronunciations. I mean, you have Sephardic, for instance, like a tav, right? So if there's no dot in the tav, right? So Ashkenazim will pronounce it as a sav, like sit, sis, not sit, sit, right? So, there is a difference, with that in pronunciation. It doesn't, again, they have, there are different, traditions that have been passed down. It doesn't negate it. That doesn't negate it. So when you say the Shema, and you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Why do you say Echad? Because what's the last letter in the word Shema? Shin Mem Ayin. Right? Ayin. Right. What's the last word of the word Echad? It's a Daled. Right. What do you get when you put an Ayin and a Daled together? You get the word Aid. Aid, right. The word Aid means witness. Mm-hmm. To witness. So I guess if you're if you're Sephardic, you'll the ayin is also a guttural, right? You'll say Shema, right, with that ayin. So that's sort of elongated till you get to echad, because you're declaring God's unity in the world, and you're a witness. It's like you're a witness to that. We don't stand when you say it. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but you say it while you're sitting, right? But that is giving testimony to the fact that God is unique and God is one. Right. God is one in the world. One and one. Anyway, God is one in the world, right? So, even with the Yemenite tradition, same thing. They have a different pronunciation, right? But again, the pronunciation does not nullify. It will in certain ways. Now, this is an interesting point. There are differences in the way, let's say, a Sephardic person and a Ashkenazic person will read from the Torah, right? This is really what, really get down to nitty gritty. An Ashkenazic person should not go to a Sephardic synagogue and listen to the reading of the Torah. For him, pronunciation is off. Right. Right? But a Sephardic person could go to an Ashkenazic synagogue and listen to the way the Torah is read. Right? For him, it's okay. Right? For him, he'll fulfill his obligation. So that is a major point, in pronunciation, in pronunciation itself. That's,
but in this case,
that will come in.
But in this case, just for the ones out there who are not aware of the Hebrew alphabet and the wording system, just because it has a different pronunciation, or because they choose to pronounce that particular word differently, does not change the meaning of that word, though. I mean, it's not like in English, where if I changed hat, H-A-T, to H-E-A-T and pronounce it differently, it does mean something differently. But in Hebrew, it doesn't. Right. If you're picking a word, just because it's like the difference between Avodah Zarah or Avodah Zarah. I mean, that sounds two totally different things, but it's exact.
Tomato or tomato.
Exactly. Right. So.
Or car, depends on where you're from.
Right. So just wanted to push that clarification out there, just in case those didn't know. So.
Okay, what was the second part? Second part of that question was?
I don't remember. I think we discussed that briefly up front, and actually we already talked about whatever it was up front, and then we switched over to the Beget Kepet.
Oh, that was about the Mesoretic text, I think, also being what do you call it, the Dead Sea Scrolls? That was with that also.
Right.
Oh yeah, that was about, yeah. So I want one thing. I want people to understand. This is going to open a whole can of worms, which we do sometimes, and that is you have to be careful where you get your information from. There are people that will, swear by, archaeology. Archaeology has its place, but keep in mind a lot of archaeologists do not have, a Torah outlook. They're into it because they're into it for whatever reason. I'm talking about, archaeology here, like, Jewish archaeology, improving things from the past or whatever. So they have an agenda also. They definitely have, their own agenda, and most people in this path, wherever they're coming from, I think, have seen so many things that they've been, fed a bag of bones, so to speak, or, given information that is not accurate. So I studied history in college, and, history is just his story, right? Is how people put a spin on, what's going on in history from different perspectives. So, this is no different. Again, with the Torah scrolls and the things that were found, they're uniform. There may be some discrepancies in some words that I'm not going to disagree, right? But again, if it's if you want to go, this is not 51-49% here. You're talking it's almost 100%.
Right.
So you want to tell me that that there are archaeologists that are going to say no, they had different things, and they want to prove from this and prove from that. It's their theory, right? It's their theory. We have a history that goes back, that goes back 3,500 years, and there's an oral tradition that's passed down. We believe in it because A, it works, and B, it makes sense of what we do. Because there's a lot of things in the Torah that don't make any sense. So, who am I going to listen to? Who are you going to listen to, right? Who am I going to listen to? An archaeologist that's got an attitude that he's going to try and prove his own point, or we're going to listen to people that could have brought people back from the dead. That that's the spiritual level they were on. You're comparing, it's like comparing apples and oranges. It's even today, where 80% of the Jewish people, 90% of the Jewish people not holding anywhere, right? The most important question they may ever ask in their lifetime is, do I put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog, right? That's, ketchup, mustard, it's July 4th. Oh, maybe I'll put in relish. Relish, gee, I never thought about relish, mustard, ketchup. Up until 250 years ago, everybody was Orthodox. So you want to say, oh, there are all these, all these other movements. Yeah, they started and changed what the Torah said. If you feel like doing it, fine. If not, that was a platform. In the late 1880s, with the Reform movement, they started taking different things out, opened up a whole Pandora's box, and that was the beginning and the end. And the conservative movement was only about 10 years behind. They were about 10 years behind them. And then, you get, people call themselves, modern Orthodox. Some are stronger, some are weaker, and they're like 10 years behind the conservative movement, in many ways. So, yeah, you have these other, so-called movements, which I'll call, pretenders to the throne. And I was, I learned for a couple years, at the head of the, the conservative movement, and it was an absolute train wreck. I mean, it was an absolute disaster. You had people from all different ends of the spectrum, of what they believe in, and it's not uniform, and they, and passing it down, it looks like, it's not even a game of telephone. It's, it's depending who your rabbi is of your synagogue, and what they got and what they interpret and how they interpret things and what they, and what they do. And, again, that's been an absolute, disaster. And then you have another group out there. They call themselves open orthodoxy, right? I guess have your minds as open till your brains fall on the floor. But, they're not much different than conservative, the conservative movement. And some, they call themselves orthodox, but you see some of the crazy statements that they say. It's not, very much orthodox at all. So,
but I think what's interesting is that even though they're, like you mentioned earlier, they're creating all these new sects, post 250. years ago, but they're creating them because they don't like something, not because the text told them so. The text is still the same, unlike which is kind of the whole presentation for tonight. It's not like the New Testament. The New Testament has thousands of variances in the text, and no one knows. You can't even find people to agree within a single church group on what they actually see and read. But that's not the case. No, but
they're actually
Torah.
like reinterpreting.
Right.
They're reinterpreting how they see things to be, politically correct. There have been quote unquote Orthodox rabbis saying, homosexuality is not a terrible thing. I don't know. The Torah says pretty clear, but Book of Leviticus, it's an abomination. It's I don't know how you get around that. People make claims. Abraham, didn't do a good job. In the case of the binding of Isaac, God failed the binding of Isaac. That's like a reform thing. That's a conservative thing. You cannot call yourself Orthodox and say such a thing. That's absolute heresy.
Right.
Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't a good leader.
Yeah, right.
He's like the greatest person ever lived, saw God face to face. Wasn't a good leader. Why are you trying to put spin on things? That you're right, 100%. They're not. The text hasn't changed. It's their variances, and what they see is how to make it into the modern, quote unquote, modern world, right? And that's exactly what the conservative movement started to do. Right. That was exactly their motto, their manifesto. We are going to bring the Torah into the 20th century. Yeah, well, they tried to do that, and what's been the result? It's been an absolute disaster. So, you want to change things from what the norm was. Is any group that came up, against the rabbis, over the, during that time, they all fell by the wayside, and this is the same thing. They are all falling by the wayside. So, it's not anything that's changed. It's just they want it to fit into a nice box. They want to feel good about what they do. They want to have what we'll call the cultural American Jew, right? It's all about feeling good with, a little bit of the trappings without doing anything, without any commitment whatsoever. Someone told me a while ago, it's so funny, that they said, I go to the synagogue, and the rabbi there, he gets up and he speaks, and he's like a Hollywood actor. And he's getting paid like a Hollywood actor. So I said, so you're worshiping Hollywood. That's, you're going to hear this guy like jump up and down, yell and scream, quote a Rav Agon, Dennis the Menace, or the Far Side, or whatever, give this sermon. He said, wow, that was really impressive. He even made his synagogue split. Split right down the middle, like to see. He
That's
split it. But, if you ask somebody, it's like, are you serious? Like this is what you want for the future of world Jewry. I mean, I'm a little bit cynical, so people understand that. Someone, once told me many years ago, when I go to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the more money you pay, the closer you get to the air conditioning. So I said, I got a great idea. Why don't you just buy a portable and bow down to it? They're like, oh, you're very cynical. I said, but you just told me the amount of money that you pay, you get closer to the air conditioner. So I said, what's more important, prayer or the air conditioner?
Right.
What if the air conditioner breaks down? Then who are you going to pray to? Who are you going to call? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It doesn't make any rational sense. So you want to say, what makes someone, what makes a rabbi like really authentic? It's who they learn by. It's how much they know. It's not about fancy sermons or whatever. Like, how can they promote intermarriage? Like the secular movement the conservative movement just came out and said we're accepting non-Jews in our congregation without conversion. Right? It's been a major change, in policy, because they realize most of the congregations aren't Jewish. So so if that's the case, you're going to go according to the least common denominator. You're going to do whatever it takes to try and survive. Well, that was Theodore Herzl's great idea to save Jewry, was to convert everyone to Christianity. I don't know if you see the irony in that. Like, let's be all good Jews. Let's save Judaism. We'll go to Uganda. We'll go to Argentina, and we'll all be Christians. That make any sense? That doesn't make any sense to save world Jewry. So these things have changed only out of convenience. It's not out of philosophy. It's not like they're reading from the same German footnotes that nobody knows about, that no one's ever like, what about this? And it's not about that. It's all about, I want to live my life. I want to do what I do, and I'll change it the way I see. The Torah written in my own image, not in God. We're made in our own image, not God's image. right? And again, I don't really, to me, it's not about, what things mean and about changing and all that. At the end of the day, if it would work in theory, let's have a discussion, but it doesn't, and if it doesn't work, doesn't matter what your philosophy is.
Interesting. Well, I tell you what, I'm glad we covered it tonight. This is good because when I put posts up on Facebook, I never really answer any of them. I just let the people talk about it themselves. So it seems like whenever I get pulled into it, it's like a huge vacuum.
Wait a minute, that's not true. Because you tag me in the post and say, "Hey, can you answer this for me?" I get all the free time in the world. Sure, you deal with these people. I'm not going to deal with them. I'm going to put up this crazy post. You deal with them.
That way, I don't have to.
That's so funny.
Oh man, I tell you what, that's okay though. That's okay. Well, it's been a good show, man. Thank you, Rabbi. It's been very informative to say the least, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Don't know what the topic's going to be just yet, but I'm sure we'll pick a juicy one. So be sure to go to orthodoxconversion.com if you're looking to convert, or if you're curious about it, or if you're just curious about the laws of B'nai Noach.
We just want a good laugh. Just send me a text. We'll have some fun.
There you go. Subscribe to the YouTube channel on Tanakh Talk, and also don't forget we've got the new website up, TanakhTalkNetwork.com, where you can find resources for a bunch of different people who are in the same walk that we're all on. So we'll see you all next week, same time, same place, Hashem willing. And Rabbi, it's been nice. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Shalom, everybody. Take care.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה.